get on board because, first of all, I believe very much in the messaging that we're going to talk about today. And Roc is a brand that has always been about women and for women and about women's skin. And then more specifically, as a dermatologist, I like consistency when I talk about beauty routines and skincare routines. And if you were a fly on the wall in my practice, you would hear me often say that the most important things about skincare are regular broad-spectrum sunscreen as well as a topical retinol. And for some people that means prescription tretinoin or Retin-A, but I usually start people on an over-the-counter retinol, and Roc has always for many, many years been the brand that I most basically refer my patients to. So it seemed like a natural alliance here. Specifically, there's a new Retinol Correction Max Daily Hydration Cream by Roc, which does combine a powerful retinol with 24-hour hydration in the form of hyaluronic acid, which is an ingredient I know many of you are familiar with. So that's the new product specifically that we're here for today. But more importantly, we're here to talk about insights to a study that Roc recently did where they surveyed 1,000 women over the age of 40, and also just the impact of words and that impact on women and our self-esteem. So we're really here to talk about women and perception today. Thandie and I talked a little bit earlier about how, as a dermatologist, I often feel like a therapist for many of my patients, because oftentimes people come in with a specific concern, a specific spot they noticed, or a wrinkle that bothers them, or an acne breakout. And when I speak with them, I find out that oftentimes it's more about how they're feeling about themselves inside, and the skin is a manifestation of their overall health, their overall emotional state. And the skin is also just a real reflection onto how we are inside.
Because it's the largest organ in the body.
It is the
largest organ in the body. So what it does tells us so much about how we are emotionally, psychologically, and obviously physically.
Absolutely. And we talk about even basic things like I can tell if a patient is a smoker before I even start speaking with them, or if a patient's anemic because their skin is extra pale, or even something about their diet. If they're eating a lot of carrots and carotenoids, their skin might have an orange issue. So oftentimes the skin reflects overall health, but certainly even more than that, it reflects how they feel about themselves. And I hear that so much in women. They often come in because something they've noticed or something that was noticed by somebody else, whether it's a friend, a husband, a boyfriend. You know, just there's a lot of societal expectations about women and how they feel about their skin.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, just like picking spots, for example. You know, I think about that. Why do we pick our spots? Like, we know we shouldn't do it. So you're like, you just can't resist it. But it's because we're trying to be perfect. We're trying to, you know, scratch that thing off rather than just allow it to be what it is. It's telling us that we're about to start a period, or you know, that we're not sleeping enough or whatever, but rather than do that, we try and erase it because we're in denial about what's actually going on in our lives, you know.
I think that's so true.
And then it gets infected, and then we're going to scar, and then that is a nightmare.
I think that's such a good point, that people are trying to just get rid of that imperfection, erase it quickly, whether it's
they don't want to get the message that our bodies are trying to tell us.
Right.
You know, like, one of the reasons why I really like to look in the mirror and see myself without anything, and having, you know, I try not to do anything to my skin other than just, you know, cleansing and stuff, is because I need to remind myself every day, your life is not forever. This is it. And if I've got another grey, it's like, okay, you know, I've got, you know, not as much time left as I used to, and I'm going to make the most of it. If I pull that grey out, or if I erase everything that's telling me that you don't have forever, I'm going to misguide myself into thinking that I've got all the time in the world, and I haven't, and time is running out, and we've got to do stuff now, and I'm going to live my life now. And it's actually important to look and see those shadows and see those grey hairs, and rather than be like, oh God, this is a nightmare, it's, come on, I'm going to really, like, I've got to make the most of this. This is my life, I've got to make the most of it. So if we erase this, you know, the aging process like that, we're actually completely deluding ourselves.
Right, and denying about where we've been, and also recognizing where we will go.
Because we're not allowed to celebrate our achievements.
Right.
You know, like the very fact, as a woman, I'm sorry, I'm already like going off.
You're good.
But, you know, as women, you know, the fact that motherhood is not seen as one of the most important jobs, it is the most important job in the world. The most important job. The fact that it's not up there considered, the fact that it's not paid, number one. You know, is crazy. It is the most important job, but because as women, we have been denied that fact, and there's a different narrative has been put into the world, which is that that's not important. Actually, going out and earning money is an important thing. You know, we do feel like, you know, God, you know, because we're not given the support and we're not celebrated for what we're doing. Right? We don't feel proud of what we're achieving. It's like we're just having to do it behind a closed door and we're just going out of our minds.
To share a personal recent experience that totally goes along with this. As I explained, I am a marathon runner, and I just finished my 7th marathon earlier this month. But thank you. But something that was really interesting to me, I run with my sister, and we ran our first marathon 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago this year. And that was while I was still in medical school and before I was married, before I had children. And then 20 years later, so our goal back then was to break 4 hours, and we literally crossed the finish line holding hands, and it said 3:59:59. Wow. 20 years later, you're now a mother, and you know, are you going to be able to do it? And so we actually did, and we did it a minute faster 20 years later. And people said, at your age, for your age, you can really, you know, you could really beat that time. But we were so proud to do it at 3:58. And I think, you know, running was sort of just an example. But to your points, I think in some ways we were so naive in our first marathon. And granted, we were younger and more fit, but we have so much more experience now, and we really embrace running. We're really so much prouder. We run in these shirts that say sisters, and everyone's like, oh, they're sisters. And you know, we saw mothers with their daughters cheering us on. So it really was more empowering, and it allowed us to experience.
So you also did it faster.
We did it a minute faster, yes.
Yeah, but 20 years on, you did it faster.
Right.
So
right, so the age thing is irrelevant, right?
It's completely irrelevant.
Right.
It's completely irrelevant. So that someone saying you did great for your age, it is a backhanded compliment.
Totally.
But I don't think people actually realise that they are being derogatory. Right?
They think they're meaning well.
They think they're complimenting you.
Which brings us to why we're here today, because we do realize that these little words, you know, for your age, can make a big difference. And before we continue the conversation, I'm curious if when you arrived this morning, when you walked in, you were asked to make a choice, to look in the mirror and declare, do you look good or do you look good for your age? Did any of you even notice that when you walked in this morning? Yeah, okay. And did the phrase make you take a pause?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. You want to look good, period.
Yes.
Yes.
Age should not have anything into it. But it's always that way. You're always being judged on your age.
Yep.
And it's frustrating.
It is frustrating. It's limiting.
It's very limiting. And it's wrong. But people look at you and go, oh, well, you know, she's X age, but she looks really good. Or she's so young and she looks really good. And it's like, no, you look good.
Period.
You're smart. Not you're smart for your age, or you're confident for your age, or you run well for your age, or you act well for your age. It's like you should be just accepted for who you are.
And we're going to talk about that definitely in more detail.
Thank you for sharing that. So, you know, since I was first approached about this campaign for your age, I didn't realize how much it really comes up in everyday life. And I was guilty myself of thinking that and hearing that and saying that. And since I was made aware of it, I've been mindful, sort of not to, because as a dermatologist, people are so fixated on that number and their age, and people come in, and I was telling Thandie earlier that interestingly, the 9s, like when someone's about to turn 40 and they're 39, or even 29 turning 30, or 49 or 59, there's such this, we were saying, dreadful anticipation about this birthday that in the end really is just another day. But that's the most often time when patients come in and they say, I have this birthday coming up, I must need Botox, or I need something, or I need, you know, and they're really just addressing this negative connotation about this number.
Yeah, these benchmarks that are placed on us, you know, we're literally born into it, this, you know, the importance of the number of our age, when in fact, if you look around, there are you get 10, 40-year-olds together, and there's so much diversity in there that it makes the category completely illusory. It's just like, it doesn't mean anything at all. So why do we then internalize it and categorize ourselves in that way, when actually it's up to us, completely.
Right. I think we try our best to have a choice about how we feel. And I think it's interesting also as a healthcare provider, I find it easier to impart that to patients. So I'll explain to them, I'm not trying, because patients will say to me, I don't want to look 20 years younger, but maybe 10 years or 5 years. And I'm like, well, we're not trying to make you look a different age. We're trying to help make you look like the best version of yourself.
That's so great you do that.
And so that's what I work on, but it's funny how then when you turn the mirror back and think about how you feel about yourself, and even though it's annoying to hear, oh, you did such a great time for your age, or you did, but that's how we think about ourselves. So I think it's important that we have this conversation about
definitely
trying to remove those words.
Literally, my 12-year-old last week said, "Oh, J-Lo looks so good for her age." And I'm like, I know for a fact, I'm your mother and you're 12. You have no idea what that means. But she's already got into the habit of saying it because she listens to people, she watches YouTube, and it's just something that's bandied about, and people don't actually realise what a bum out it is to hear that. It's like, you look really good for your age. It's like, oh, it's like a deflated balloon when you hear that.
Well, I love J-Lo and I love how she dances, and it's funny because my kids make fun of me because if we're ever at a party together and I'm doing the funky chicken on the dance floor, and my kids are embarrassed. But I think that one finding I found really interesting from this study that Roc did is that more than 60% of women have shared that they altered their behavior after being told that their actions are not age appropriate. So whether that's, wearing a short skirt or doing the funky chicken on the stage at the dance party, or whatever it is, but I think really trying to embrace it and feel good about yourselves is the best that we can do for ourselves and for our patients and our friends.
Definitely.
Okay, so Tam, I'd like to ask you a few questions to see how you respond based on some of the questions that Roc asked women across the country from their survey, and I also threw in a few personal questions I wanted to know also. You ready? Okay. So speaking of words, what is your favorite word?
Kindness. That's my favorite word. And it's not really about, it's just what it means. It's and how simple it is and how complicated it is at the same time. So just be kind. And I also think how hard it is to be kind to oneself. It is so hard, with the amount of pressures. So the society throws on us, that life throws at us. And being gentle with oneself, I think, is one of the most important things. So kindness.
That is so good. I think it's so true too. And I have a patient obsessing over like a pimple, or saying, I've had women say to me, I wake up before my boyfriend or before my significant other so I can put makeup on. And I said, and I firmly believe this, I'm like, if you just try to feel good about yourself and not obsess about concealing the one imperfection or getting rid of it, like you said, that positive attitude goes so much further than
we need help. It's like you can do it individually, but if you do all that work at home with yourself, and then you go out into the world, you go out into your workplace, you go out into society, and then you're burdened with these, oh, you look good for your age, or this is what you're supposed to do, that's inappropriate, whatever. It is exhausting, because it's one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, two steps back. We need these conversations are going to allow us to actually continue this wonderful progress that we make as individuals, in the world. Because I don't want my kids saying J-Lo was good for her age. I didn't ask her to say that. I didn't influence her to say that. That's what happens outside the front door, So society needs to change too, so that we can continue growing.
Absolutely. So your job is to bring words to life on the screen. How have words shaped you over the course of your life?
Oh my goodness. So profoundly have words shaped. Categorizations that have changed over time. Just, 1 minute you can say she's coloured, 1 minute you have to say she's black, 1 minute you have to say she's, like, I remember people used to say half caste, and that's wrong. And I know, it's hideous, right? And all these categories and ways to describe me with words. I gave a TED talk about this, and it was so bad, actually, and I was so confused about who I was based on the perception through words that I just kind of broke down over lots of periods of time, until I realized that who I was actually none of those things, because I was judging myself on the perception of others. But other people's perceptions are their own, that's their view, and their view's been coloured by so many different things. So the great thing about having been bashed down, you know, because I'm from England too, it's a whole different thing to the experience that you guys have here. Of course, we're all having different experiences where I'm considered dark-skinned. And I remember I went on the Tavis Smiley show over here, and I was just talking to Tavis, and I'm like, yeah, because, you know, dark-skinned, and he just started chuckling. And it's so funny, he goes, you describe yourself as dark-skinned. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you're not dark-skinned. And I'm thinking, but I am, and it caused me so much pain, because I was objectified like that. So these words, they're hugely, hugely important. And I think the worst, one of the worst instances of this was about, I don't know, 10 years ago. I was having a meeting with a studio head. This is what we talked about before, isn't it? Yeah, I was having a meeting with a studio head about this really big movie, and if I did it, it was going to launch me into the stratosphere and all the rest of it. And the studio head was a woman, and she was describing the character that I was going to play, and it was written for a pale-skinned person, apparently. And yet they wanted me to do the role. I was excited, you know, great. And she's like, okay, but there's a few changes we're going to have to make to the script because, you know, she's a university graduate, she's really kind of well-adjusted, and I'm like, I went to Cambridge. And she goes, yeah, but you're different. We've got to try and make this more black. Their words. And she even said, I don't mean to be politically incorrect, but. So these words were just appalling, horrifying. You know, and I suddenly realised the extent of misunderstanding and ill judgment. And this is a studio head. Films are hugely important and influential. You know, so it's like, and she said, you know, I said, I'm a university graduate. Yeah, but you're different. I mean, and that's the same as for your age. Right. You know, that qualifier. Labeling. Yes. But, and it's happened so often in my life that it now doesn't mean anything. And that's actually been incredibly liberating. Because it's like, all your words, they're just words. They're just words, you know. But the impact of those words, I mean, for me it was extreme over time. It really was. It happened so much. So, you know, as a result, I've had to learn a different way, and I think that's what makes me able to really be compassionate and understand what people are going through. But for a lot of people, it only has to happen once, and you internalize it, and you're going to judge yourself for the rest of your life. We've got to stop that from happening.
Yep. Thanks for sharing that.
That's why I'm here.
So this is a fill in the blank. I'd rather you compliment my blank sooner than you compliment me using for your age.
I'd rather you complimented my intelligence than that, you know, I'm smart for my age, or, you know, which I guess wisdom is acquired as you get older. But that's kind of more important than the physical stuff.
Yep. I'm glad to hear you say that. In fact, in the study, the majority of women would rather not receive a compliment at all than one with a modifier. And in terms of skin, what I've learned from my patients is that they really want to feel good about themselves. And that's, again, what I'm trying to impart to them, not fixate on how old they look and what number they are or any labeling that they may feel, but just to help their skin feel healthy, refreshed, and as good and as comfortable in their skin as they can be.
Yeah.
Okay, so another stat here. 82% of women over the age of 40 have been told they look great for their age. Did you ever think that something that's supposed to make you feel good could make you feel so bad?
I think I kind of answered that with the thing about the studio head. It's like, you know, oh, but Thandie, you know, you're different. So, and that was meant to be, you're special because you're not, you don't fall into that category of, like, she literally said, you know, maybe you could at some point like get onto the table and start like dancing, you know, and I'm like, but I wouldn't do that. But she was like, that was the stereotypical black thing to do. I mean, it was unbelievable. So that, but it was meant to be a compliment. It was meant to be a compliment. But I think I just don't think that she's ever experienced, you know, she hasn't experienced enough to really understand, you know, how people are. And I think a lot of it is because people don't communicate with one another enough. We don't talk enough, and that's why the internet is so exciting, because there's vast numbers of people who are expressing themselves, and it's changing how we feel about each other. It's changing. It's like, oh, I didn't realise that you thought that. Oh, that makes me feel less frightened of you, or it makes me feel less different to you.
Yeah.
And I think that if people can come forward and say and tell us your own experiences when you've been told, given a compliment for your age, afterwards, then we're going to be able to really reflect and realise that we've all had this crappy burden to bear, and we can actually rid it from our own minds. I mean, the first place you've got to rid it from is your mind, because we internalise these things and we start to tell ourselves, that we are, getting older, I just feel like women, we start having babies and it's like we're redundant. It's like, one of the things that I find so offensive is the term MILF. It's so offensive, the idea that, if you're a mother, it's like we should be grateful if we're attractive. I mean, I know when I first started having kids, I felt absolutely extraordinary. I felt amazing, incredible. But society just doesn't allow us, like I said before about the work situation. Our mothering is not considered a job, and it is the most important job in the world. And I think that women are, if we don't start addressing that, women are just going to be in this category of old and useless. It's like we don't have a purpose anymore. Once we start having kids and we're at home, we don't have a purpose. If we were paid, we would have, it would be considered a purpose. And we're exhausted. And I actually think that when people say for your age, they're complimenting us on the fact that we hold down jobs, we look after our families, we support our partners, and we fight misogyny. We have such a big job to do. And all of those things really crank up once we start having kids, right? Kids wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, we're knackered. Of course we've got dark circles under our eyes, puffy, we drink coffee to try and make up for it, so we're dehydrated, right? We're so super stressed. We eat on the run, so our digestion is a mess. Of course we're going to start looking haggard. It's not that we're older, it's that we're stressed and exhausted and pressurized out of our minds. It shouldn't be called anti-aging, it should be called anti-stress creams, really. But if society doesn't actually recognize the amount that women do, we're going to continue saying these rubbish things to each other. Right. We look good despite the fact that we're Renaissance women who do so much.
What you just said about the MILF comment made me think to another thing that's ridiculous, but I remember so distinctly being in my 20s, walking down Lexington Avenue with my mother, and there was like a group of construction workers, and they, said something to me, which I probably didn't even notice at that age or think about it.
Because it happens all the time, and it's normalized.
My mother, though, said, oh, you don't even realize how it is to be young. I just wish I could be young, because no one does that to me anymore. But when you're at that age, you're thinking, when you're in your 20s, you're not really necessarily thinking about the aging process. And that story stuck with me, that my mother, who at the time was probably in her early 50s, and she was almost jealous that these construction men were
she wanted the attention.
And it's
because I think
so interesting.
Once a woman is not available anymore, right? She is useless. She is valued less. And if we saw motherhood as an incredible job, an incredible asset to society, which it is, things would change. And I think these are hangovers from a long time ago. If we think about the 40s and 50s, women stayed at home with the kids, and so that's how things were. But things have changed now, but I don't think that the dialogue has changed. I don't think that society reflects these amazing changes that have happened. I mean, it's gradually getting there, and these sorts of conversations will definitely help.
Right, for sure. So, talking about differences between women and men, another statistic from the study from Roc was that 87% of women agree that while women are criticized as their looks change with age, men are conversely complimented more as they age. So, Thandie, if aging men get to be called silver foxes, I think aging women should be called blank.
Oh, goddesses. Goddesses. I mean, absolutely. Everything I've just kind of tried to outline, what we do, and society hasn't caught up with that. you know, it's post-war really, when men went off to fight and women started taking over all the jobs that men do. That's when things really started to change, and we saw the 60s and this incredible revolution. And it's like, you know, one step forward, two steps back, but it is changing.
We're making progress.
But you know, if you think about what a man with grey hair, silver fox, a woman with long grey hair, that's a witch. I'm sorry, but it's like
a hag.
Stereotypes. It's true. And if you, I mean, I was thinking about this obviously for today, and you know, think about Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart, right? They were the absolute it couple. She was 18 when they were doing those movies together. He was 40. No one blinked an eye. That was completely appropriate. If you look now, I mean, God bless Denzel. You know, he's got young women. It's never mentioned. You get an older woman with a younger man, and it just is like, what? I mean, it's so preposterous. Remember Sam Taylor Wood and her 18-year-old boyfriend? Yeah, she was like 42. No one could believe it. And there are countless examples of that, right? But why is it different in the reverse? And it's just because we're so, these hangovers from the past, where they were in place then and they haven't changed, you know, and we're so used to seeing it on screen, and yet we haven't managed to.
I think we're making slow progress. And the Prime Minister of France, right, his wife is 15 years older than him, right? Something like that. They met when she was his teacher, the Prime Minister of France. Yeah. So I thought that was like a step in the right direction.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
And something interesting in my practice, which I find is over the past maybe year or two, men are starting to come in for aesthetic procedures because they're saying, especially with job crises, probably that's a good part. Now they see how it feels. And they say, you know, they want to keep their job, they want to feel young in the workplace. So it's been interesting for me as a dermatologist that men, I'm actually almost getting my patients to wear sunscreen every day. It's much harder to get men to do that. But, you know, they are actually listening now, and they're coming in and asking about keeping their skin better. So to me, you know, in my field, that's progress.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
All right, so speaking of roles in movies, what is it that attracts you to a character? You told us before about something that was a real turn-off by that producer, but what is something that attracts you to a character?
I tend to play complicated roles where on the surface you could judge that person very harshly. I tend to play characters who stereotypically you would condemn. And I try and get underneath that and show the humanity in a person so that an audience doesn't automatically, in a knee-jerk fashion, condemn someone. Any negative behaviour is a cry for help. And I have tried and tried to do that. Like I did a movie called Pursuit of Happiness, where it's based on a true story, although because of legal reasons, the character, I wasn't even able to say, I hate you to this guy, Chris Gardner, who's a real character. And she abandons her son and her husband, and they end up living on the streets. And everyone hated this woman. And for me, when I read that script, I thought, but she clearly wants to kill herself. Because to leave your child, that's suicide. So it's been really important in my career, and I haven't meant to do it, but I just keep looking back and it just keeps happening, just to try and find the humanity so that we don't judge people, so that we are kind, and that we realize that negative behavior comes from a place of pain and fear, and rather than incarcerate, rather than condemn, rather than destroy, we actually try and learn where this negative behavior comes from so that we can find the compassion, you know, and also it becomes a warning to someone who hasn't done that, you know. And the reason we throw stones at people and, you know, as soon as someone's done something bad, everyone starts throwing stones is because we're so terrified that we might do the same thing one day. So if we kind of destroy it, it destroys even the idea that, you know, we don't even have to think about it anymore. And I just think that, you know, prisons are filled with the truth, and we just want to lock the truth away and not look at it. And I feel like that's the same with beauty. With skincare, we don't want to look in the mirror and see those lines, see those shadows, because it's the reality of, oh my goodness, my life is going, and am I fulfilled? My life is going along, and am I respected? You know, and if we were to feel those things intensely, we'd make a change. And I think that's what's happening in the world today. We are feeling so intensely, you know, the wrongness of these words for your age, the wrongness of these terms. And we're feeling it so intensely because of everything that's happening in the world with, you know, misogyny and so on. And we're actually so cross that we're saying something for the first time. And that is brilliant. It's brilliant.
Can we ask questions?
Yes.
I had a question. I wanted to say thank you so much for your story about the studio head, because one of my issues, I worked in Hollywood for like 15 years. One of my issues with the whole Me Too thing is, as black women, we went through sexual harassment and racism from white women. So, I mean, I got the whole, like, I would fax my resume, they'd say, can you start tomorrow? And then they would be like, oh, you're overqualified when I arrived. And so there was a lot of that going on too that I feel that needs to be exposed as well.
Absolutely, and it's about, that's why, you know, a company like Roc doesn't need to do this. They don't need to do this. They're a hugely successful brand for good reason. They don't need to have this conversation, but there are two ways for cultural conversations to happen. One is because of a disaster, like let's say Rodney King, you know, then the conversation about race happens, right? Or a conversation about race happens. And another way to start a conversation is through art or through, you know, people who have the platform being brave and, you know, literally facilitating a conversation that is going to then allow us to have these cultural conversations. And I just think it's wonderful that a company like Roc, a brand like Roc, which doesn't need to look into this, they can just keep selling their, you know, very successful products. But instead they're putting the weight of their industry behind these things because they realise that women everywhere who are responding to Roc, you know, they desperately want a voice, and Roc is providing it. I think it's fascinating.
And the question I like to always ask an actress is, who is your favorite actress of all time and your favorite movie?
Can I tell you afterwards?
Yes.
I have to think about that for a minute because
Okay.
there's so many incredible people. So many.
And just back to Roc for a second, and then I'm going to ask one final question. I think for me in my profession, especially on those birthdays where people come in, okay, if I can do just one thing to look younger, like should I do Botox, or should I do laser, or should I do filler? And I really firmly believe, and I tell them, you know, number 1, 2, and 3 are sunscreen, sunscreen, and sunscreen, and then adding a retinoid to your skin routine, because it has been, well, it's really, those are the only 2 anti-aging ingredients that have been proven in longitudinal studies for decades to really help keep the skin looking young and healthy. So, you know, again, Roc has always been my go-to over-the-counter. As a dermatologist, I like to always offer, you know, something I may carry in the office versus something you can get in the drugstore, or something that I might prescribe. So I think it's great, and I think it really goes
And
along
here's the
well
other
with
thing,
the messaging.
okay? Here's the other thing. It's filled with so many ingredients that are valuable, like with the retinol, to just help with the, you know, recharging of the skin, the hydrochloric acid.
Hyaluronic acid.
Oh God, I can never say
Thank
it right.
God.
But it is like a miracle, that
So
stuff.
we just call it
It is
HA.
a miracle, because it literally puts water back in, and with 75% water, for God's sake. You would